What does this season look like for the Colorado Buffaloes? Deion Sanders dealing with some unknown health issues. He did thank the fans for their support and well wishes. He said everything is okay. He will continue to be so in a social post on social media on June 11th. The Buffaloes coach is excited to get his team right now and get them ready, but there will be quite some changes when it comes to the Buffaloes. A lot of different players that are going to be in starting roles. We have Adam Munsterteiger, our 24/7 sports beat writer for Colorado, and our college football analyst, Bud Elliot, joining us now on Spotlight. So Deion beginning a new era as a head coach in Colorado. The team going to look very different this year. His son, Shedeur Sanders, and their star player in Travis Hunter onto their next chapters with the NFL. So Adam, what does this next chapter look like for Deion and the Colorado football team?
Yeah, so different. Not only is Shedeur Sanders off to the NFL, but Shiloh Sanders, his other son, is gone. So this is the first time in Deion Sanders' coaching career, going all the way back to when he was coaching youth football, that he'll be without those sons. So it's going to look different. This has got to be a team that is a little bit more balanced than it was before. You know, you were able to lean on so much of the talent of Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter the last two seasons. And so much of the last two seasons was about trying to maximize, you know, those two guys and, you know, their eligibility being close to being exhausted. And now that that time has come, you look back and the O-line issues caused those two from maybe achieving more team success than they otherwise could have. But yeah, this is a team that's going to have a lot of depth on it for Colorado based on what they've done recruiting wise the last three off seasons under Coach Prime. But it's not going to be the headlining one or two guys that you were used to in Boulder the last 2 years.
I think Adam nailed it. When we talked about this on the Cover 3 Summer School edition, we had him on. Adam does such a great job covering Colorado for us. You know, you mentioned the more balance, more run game. Obviously, if you don't have Shedeur Sanders, you're not going to drop back and throw it 40, sometimes 45 times a game. You're going to have to be on the run game more. And I think one of the interesting parts to that is whether quarterback Kaden Salter is going to be the starter. If he's the guy, and obviously, you know, Adam knows more than I do here, but if he's the guy, this is a guy who's a legitimate threat with his legs. If you go back to Liberty, you know, they made the Fiesta Bowl in 2023 in large part because he was such a good runner. Now, I know he was unhappy last year at Liberty. He tried to transfer out. I don't know if it was, you know, credits or what it was that made him unable to transfer out, but he had to kind of go back to the school that he tried to transfer out from when he was trying to level up. So didn't have the year that he wanted to have last year, but I have to think the athleticism is still there. And if he's happy and motivated and locked in, that could be a major part in helping Colorado's run game go along because he is a real threat with his legs.
Adam, some talent is hard to replace, that's for sure. We just heard about Salter there. Give me a little bit of a deeper dive into who he is as a quarterback, and then also maybe a name or two when you think about a guy that can replace Hunter.
Yeah, with Kaden Salter, you know, his best football was played 2 years ago, like Bud said, when he was at Liberty, and he was his conference's player of the year that year. And there were a lot of people that thought he was going to transfer. That didn't end up happening. And so this is kind of his last opportunity. You know, I don't know if he's an NFL quarterback, but a lot of what he does is suited really well for the college game, especially when you look at what Kaden Salter's experience in the RPO game is. And to Bud's point there is that balance has been such an issue for Colorado. They ranked dead last in the FBS ranks in rushing offense the past couple of years. And sure, some of the short passing game can be a little bit of an extension of the run game. So maybe that can be a little bit misleading, but the offensive linemen at times, I felt like at Colorado the last 2 years had a hard time getting in a rhythm because you talk to offensive linemen, what do they like to do? They like to run block. It's an ability for them to be aggressive. Whereas when you're passing the ball 2/3 of the time, especially when another team starts having success rushing the passer, your confidence can get shattered pretty quick. And we saw that in Boulder the last couple of years. When you've got a dual threat quarterback like Kaden Salter that can just make something out of nothing, I feel like that would really give this O-line a boost at times and take a little pressure off them.
You mentioned the O-line there. Now each college team is looking up to bolster their depth on the front lines. Walk us through how Colorado's O-line is looking at this point, and then give us a little hint on what's going on with the D-line as well, Adam.
You start with Jordan Seaton, who was a freshman All-American last year, and he's getting some national All-American consideration this preseason. Really advanced as far as a pass protector for being 20 years old at this point. And so he's one of the guys that they've really looked to lead this team, which is pretty rare for somebody just going into their second year in college. But Jordan Seaton has got that personality. He was a 5-star recruit. He has kind of dealt with this being in the spotlight for a few years now and has handled that really well. The rest of the offensive line, you could debate between 2 or 3 guys at a lot of spots. What's good for Colorado this year is you've got more guys on the O-line that have starting experience at the FBS level, as opposed to the previous couple of years where once you got past the first 6 or 7 offensive linemen, there was a real drop off. This year, you're seeing positions like right tackle, they're going to go 2-3 deep in terms of competition. How that pans itself out, it's hard to say, but I would say the floor is higher once again with this offensive line, and then the question mark becomes, what exactly is that group ceiling?
But there are some questions at linebacker. They did just secure a big name in the class of 2026 in Colby Johnson. How are we looking for 2025?
I think 25, could be potentially a step back with who they lost. They lost, now I forgot his name, to Alabama in the transfer portal. But Martavius French, Reginald Hughes. I think they have enough there to where linebacker probably shouldn't be a massive liability. And if it does take a step back, I still think the defensive line for Colorado, as Adam said, has stacked enough bodies who were at least at one point recruited to like the upper half of the Power Five. Guys who played at Tennessee, at Alabama. Pitt has done a really nice job, Okunlola, developing defensive linemen in recent years. So hopefully they can maybe cover that up. But also they'll probably be on the field for fewer snaps this year. There's no way Colorado is on the field quite as much this year just because they're not going to be passing as much. They're probably going to play a little bit slower offensively, if I had to imagine, more running. So hopefully we can kind of cover that up a little bit.
Linebacker was a position that we were questioning going into last year, and that group exceeded everybody's expectations. Nakai Hill-Green, who Bud mentioned, that transferred to Alabama, transferred in from Charlotte, and folks around here didn't quite know what to expect from him, but he had a great season. And Levanta Bentley was kind of on the fringe of all conference discussion as well last year. This year, yeah, it is a question mark, especially depth-wise. As long as those guys can stay healthy and serviceable, I think they'll be okay, because you look at the defensive line, that's probably the most improved group on this entire team. So they're going to make those linebackers' job a little bit easier. But I think if you polled Colorado fans, what was maybe the biggest disappointment this offseason, it would be offensively not landing a top-tier running back to be a feature back, and then just defensively linebacker, having a marquee guy at that position going into the summer.
I want to pull up the 2025 schedule, and Bud, give me your predictions of how you expect all of this to play out.
Sure. So opening with Georgia Tech, I do see that as an advantage. Georgia Tech. Tech brings back a lot. Colorado has some pieces in which I'm confident they will be good eventually. I don't know how well that team is going to kind of coalesce in game one. And Georgia Tech last year was very, very ready for their opener. Obviously, they beat Florida State over there in Ireland. Delaware is an easy win. At Houston is probably the one coin flip game on this list that I did not give to the Buffs. I think Houston feels pretty good. And if Houston has a weakness, it's the secondary. Last year, that would have been terrible for Houston to have against Colorado. This year, maybe a little bit less so. Wyoming should be a win. I actually gave Colorado a win over BYU at home now, certainly after the news with Jake Retzlaff leaving the team. I think at TCU's probably a loss. I gave them a win at home over Iowa State. Iowa State lost a lot off last year's team. At Utah basically never loses at home, so that is a very difficult place to play. So gave them the loss there. A win hosting Arizona. A win actually at West Virginia. I think West Virginia might have serious depth issues that come home to roost by that time in the season. And then I do have them finishing with 2 losses, Arizona State and Kansas State. But that's still making a bowl. And I think that's probably, like, if you told Colorado right now, they probably wouldn't say this publicly, but privately, if you said, hey, you guys are still making a bowl after losing Shedeur and Travis, I think they might take that. Maybe Adam disagrees.
Well, first off, kudos for breaking down a Big 12 schedule, because that is not easy to do these days. You've got a conference that has just done away with the preseason media poll because last year was such an embarrassment. And you mentioned that at Houston is a coin flip game. I agree. I see a lot of coin flip games on that schedule. And so I feel that the floor of this team, based on the talent that they've brought in the last 3 off seasons, and having a Kaden Salter that's going to be at worst a serviceable quarterback, at best one of the better playmakers at the position in the conference. So I would say that the ceiling's yet to be determined, but I think they'll go to another bowl game.
All right, I feel like fans would take that. That's my take on it all. Adam Munsterteiger, Bud Elliot, previewing the 2025 Colorado Buffaloes season. You could hear about that and every other team really on the Cover 3 podcast. Their latest pod talking about Cincinnati, saying Cincinnati needs to get to 7 wins in 2025. Check it out wherever you take in your favorite pods.